what is it, 23rd day of June 1999. We're here at Lane Place, the home of the Montgomery County Historical Society. I'm Bob Wernle, the chairman of the local history, the oral history section of the Montgomery County Historical Society, and the fellow doing the taping is Mike Hall, who is the executive director of the society. We've been doing a series of interviews of men and women who served mainly in World War II, although some of them have gone up into the Vietnam War as well as the Korean War. And this morning we're interviewing another veteran who lives in Montgomery County, who had an interesting experience as a young man after he was drafted in the service. He's Joe Hinesley. Joe, is that your full name?
Well, it's Joe Edwin Hinesley.
It's not Joseph.
No. But I've always used E instead of the middle.
Okay. And Joe, would you tell us first of all the date of your birth?
April 6, 1924.
And where were you born?
I was born in a little town called Hockley, Indiana.
What is that?
Hockley.
Hockley.
Yeah. It's over between Delphi and Rossville, Indiana.
Uh-huh. And who were your parents?
My dad was Everett Hinesley. My mother was Lottie Hinesley. She was originally a Gopinar. They had farms up around Rossville.
Uh-huh. And was your dad a farmer?
Yes.
Okay. And what was their nationality? Were they?
Well, Dad was a little bit German Dutch, and my mother was quite a bit Dutch.
Uh-huh. And Joe, where did you go to school? Where'd you go to school?
I went to Rossville.
It's the high school there, to grade school and high school.
I originally started in Mulberry, Indiana, so up to the 5th grade.
Uh-huh.
Then my parents moved, and I went to Rossville from 6th grade on.
Was that a one-room schoolhouse, or?
No, we was a little bit fortunate. We had a little bit more than one room.
How big a high school was that?
Well, when I graduated, there was 42 in the class, and I graduated in 42, so
That's easy.
Quite a bit smaller than what they are now.
Yeah. And what happened right after you got out of high school?
Well, I worked in a factory in Anderson, Indiana, on an assembly line for about 6 months.
Uh-huh.
Then I got called in and got that greeting from Uncle Sam.
Uh-huh. And you were drafted, in other words. You remember anything about your induction into the service or anything like that?
Yeah, yes, I went to Frankfort. That's the county seat, and they made a interview, and they said, "Where are you going? Want to know where you're going?" I said, "Well, yes, that'd be interesting." So they said, "Well, you're going to the infantry, and you'll go down to Camp Swift, Texas." But first, they sent us over to Fort Bend.
Fort Benjamin for interview.
An interview, and then they put us on a train for Camp Swift, Texas. There's a lot of sand down in Texas, I'll say that.
Did they put you, when you went into Frankfurt, to put you on a train to take you down to Indianapolis?
Yes, they did.
Okay. Everybody went on trains in those days.
Yeah.
Were any of your fellow classmates from school with you when you got on the train?
No, they had separated us from the time we got on the train. I never seen any of my classmates after that until I got back home.
Okay. And you were taken then to Fort Bend and interviewed there and they decided you were going to be. They oriented you, and what kind of a specialty did they give you, assign you?
Well, they assigned us a rifle.
Rifleman. Okay, you went and they put you on a train. Do you remember anything about that train ride?
Very little anymore. Very little.
It was, they put it, were you in a sleeper?
No, we was in coach.
Okay.
I don't know if they had sleepers back then or not.
And where did you, you went down to Texas?
Yes.
And what was the name of the fort?
Camp Swift, it was a camp. Camp Swift, Texas.
And what was that like?
Well, I'll say, as I said, there's a lot of sand there, and we've done a lot of marching. And I think the longest hikes we ever went on were 25 miles.
And the sun?
The sun got hot. I remember one march we went on, I ended up carrying 2 rifles and another guy's packs. We'd done everything we could to keep anybody from dropping out them, because they said that it made us stronger to keep everybody in the line. But
when were you assigned rifle? Did you get your rifle? Were those M1s?
I started out
with Springfields?
Springfield, but very shortly after that I got the M1.
And what do you remember about, where'd you get your uniforms? Remember where you?
Yeah, Fort Bend.
Yeah. And did they have trouble fitting?
Not too much trouble. I guess I was close to average size, so they...
Okay. And those were pretty hot, those uniforms.
Yes,
Texas, weren't they? They didn't have any summer uniforms.
Yes, we had that summer khaki, they called it.
Did you? And you got to Texas and you started your basic down there.
Yes.
And what did the basic consist of? Do you remember?
Oh, we had bayonet training. I remember that. God, if I ever get that close, I'm going to be running instead of bayoneting.
I think we'll all remember bayonet training. It makes you think, well, am I in the right place?
Yes, it certainly does.
You like those thrusts that they teach you? Okay. And did they have the full basic, did they have time to give you the full basic?
Let's see, we had 90 days, I believe it was, 3 months. And, we had the infantry training, then you had I finally got an infantry badge. I forget what they call it, I had a little rifle on it.
Yeah.
Then we went through
combat infantry?
Yeah. Badge, and how to dig foxholes, how to make yourself as small as possible. And
they give you a little shovel in your pack.
yes, some had shovels and then others had picks. I was fortunate to have a shovel. I think I could dig faster than I could with a pick. But those packs, I tell you, I couldn't even walk around the street with them now.
I forgot how heavy those packs were, but they were.
You had your blanket, your tent, half of your tent, and of course the officers had lighter packs than we did, I think. But mostly we had, from the training, we would always walk and march in someplace. And of course we had our rifle training and how to shoot it, how to load it, and how to assemble it.
Joe, I meant to ask before we got started on this, did you have any siblings or brothers or sisters?
I had brothers, 2 brothers.
Were they in the service?
No, my next brother to me is 12 years younger than I. My other brother was 14 years younger.
Oh, so
but they seen some service, but it was after World War II.
Okay, and so you were off there in Texas, and When you completed your basic, what happened, remember?
Yeah, we went to the East Coast, and I believe it was...
They put you on a train?
Yes, oh yes, the train. I think it was Camp Patrick Henry went to on the East Coast, and then we was shipped out on a Liberty ship, I believe they called them, or something like that.
You remember the name of the ship?
No, not anymore. I sure don't.
And you shipped out from where? Virginia, or where was it?
Yes, Virginia. I
Probably
believe
Newport News.
I think that's...
And remember crossing, anything about the experience of being on that Liberty ship?
Well, you know, I wasn't too big a reader, but I learned how to read pretty well going across there. I read one of these paperback books a day going over.
You know, that's exactly what happened to me. I read more books than... they have a library on the ship?
No, I'm not sure. I don't think so, but we'd trade books around with other guys. And see, I started out in the 97th Infantry when I was in Texas, and then when they shipped me overseas, we were guys that I'd never seen before. And ended up in...
I should have asked you that. What was this outfit that you were put in?
88th Division.
Okay. And who was the commanding general? You remember that?
I remember Mark Clark. Now, I can't tell you the commanding general of the 88th at that time.
Okay. What were your quarters like on board the ship?
Well, we was in a kind of a hammock. I spent most of the time on the deck.
Yeah. Sleeping on deck.
Sleeping on deck, and it got so hot down below. Then they'd chase us back down, and we'd have to go back down for a while, and then we'd slip back up. But I remember, I can always remember going overseas. There was, of course, here was in this ship, and they call them, we call them restrooms now. This guy was down beside the little stool, and every once in a while you hear him throw up, and oh God, let me die, oh God. But I never got seasick, so I was fortunate there. But boy, this guy, he was, I think that's he spent his whole time going across from beside that stool.
Did you slept in hammocks, and of course those were slung, and you would have somebody right next to you that
Yes.
the same situation you were in.
Right.
And did they have showers down there?
Yes, if you could get to them. They just had them on certain hours a day. Of course, they used seawater and they filtered it.
Saltwater showers, yeah. Okay.
But I can't tell you what the hours were anymore. But they weren't too long.
Yeah. Did you, how long were you on board ship?
7 days, I believe it was.
Mm-hmm. And where did you land?
Naples.
So that by the time you got there, somebody had already gotten rid of the Italians at Naples.
Yes.
But the Italians were still fighting at that time.
No, they had given up by that time.
They had given up. And what month was this?
Gosh, I can't remember the month.
Well, if the Italians had given up, what kind of a reception did you have?
We had very good reception. Of course, we were on trucks and they took us to this camp. But the Italians was handing it right up to us and very welcoming.
So that must have been later on then.
That would have been in 42, early 42, because it was warm, I remember that.
Mussolini, was he dead by then?
He must have been.
You didn't hear anything about Mussolini when you
I'm not sure about that, Bob. But we were, he surely, that late in the war, he surely must have been.
But you did find that the Italians were receptive.
Yes, very, very receptive.
And, well, now after, when you were, they put you ashore, did they have a camp ready for you or what?
Yes, they had a camp where everybody was shipped into, and then they would send you out to different divisions, or different companies, rather.
They were barracks or were they tents?
Tents.
Okay, and you were then you were assigned to the which division?
88th Division.
What happened next?
Well, we went up to, of course, we got at the company we were going to be with, and the next daytime, the next night, we were supposed to take this high ground on the edge of the Po Valley for an observation day, for observation for the artillery.
Well, then that was right up near Florence.
Yes,
Okay.
around that area.
It had been cleared up out that far.
Yes.
Okay, when you, how did you do that? What?
Well, we marched most of all night and got up to this hill where the Germans had had this church and we were using it for observation. And we caught them asleep, actually. Fortunate. And they surrendered. But when they surrendered, they also circled the bottom of the hill, so we couldn't get supplies or anything. And that, I think we're up there 3 or 4 days. Of course, we'd run out of everything. And they just kept moving up the hill until they got us surrounded real well. And the captain in charge had nothing, no choice, hardly. Instead of sending, I blame Clark for some of this. Maybe I might be stepping on some general's toes or something. But they surrounded and no support. They called for support to try to get those Germans back down, but they never sent it. And they done the same thing 2 different times. I've run into people later in prison camp. They said that they sent 2 different companies up. They took the hill and the Germans were just surrounded and they wouldn't get any relief or any supplies up to them. So I kind of blame the generals for not, of course I realize it's a big war, but I felt kind of neglected.
Well, now you were up near Florence then, and there was a church there.
Yes,
that the Germans were occupying, and you thought you had the thing surrounded. Is that it?
Yeah.
And you really didn't.
No, they surrounded us after we got up on the hill. They surrounded us down below and then just kept creeping up.
Okay. And you were taken prisoner?
Yes.
Well, that way you weren't in the service very long then, were you?
Not in actual combat, no.
Did you ever shoot your rifle?
Yeah, I did.
Where was that?
While I was up on top of the hill. And, of course, I shot it in basic training.
Yeah, but when you were up on top of the hill, what were you shooting at?
Anything that moved.
Down below you?
Right. Of course, they had canned, a little heavier ammunition, more machine guns than we did, so it was a matter of time till you run out of supplies.
You had a machine gun company?
No, we did not have. Well, ours was all rifle.
Just an all rifle company?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you hadn't been in very long before they...
Well, I think I was in probably 8 to 10 months, almost a year before I went overseas.
Yeah, but you hadn't landed in Italy very long before they...
No, we were there about a week before they moved us up to the front.
And you were up to the front, and you you got to the front, and the first thing you knew, your captain had surrendered you.
Right.
Okay. Well, now, how'd you find out you were, how'd they tell you that you were taken prisoner? How does that work?
Well, the German come around holding a white flag,
Yeah.
and behind him a few steps was the captain. Says, we're surrendering. Put your rifle down and come up and fall in line up here.
And what happened then?
Well, we started walking again. And we walked quite a bit that night, and they took us to some barn somewhere down in the country there. They held us in, kept us in the barn, and they interviewed us, tried to find out what they could about us. All we knew was our rank and
Serial number?
serial number.
Name, rank, and serial number.
Yes.
Well, now you say they interviewed you. Who interviewed you?
German.
And did they have an interpreter?
Yes, the one that interviewed us could speak better English than I could.
Uh-huh.
They were all, anytime you were interviewed, they spoke in English.
Well, what were, and how did you find these people that you were?
That interviewed us?
Yeah.
Well, they come to us and had this little barn or room, and one at a time. She was a little bit scared. She didn't know if she was going to get shot or what.
Uh-huh.
But they interviewed us, and then when you said name, rank, and serial number, anything else you want to say, and they'd send you back out to where everybody was.
How many people did this surrender involve?
Approximately one company under strength, I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm. How many would that be?
I expect there was 20, 25 of us, 20, 25.
Had you struck any friendships up with any of these fellows in your outfit?
Not really, because I wasn't with them long enough to really strike up a conversation.
Did you know your captain?
I couldn't tell you his name this day.
Mm-hmm. You remember anything about him at all?
Oh, he's a pretty nice looking guy.
Okay. All right, Joe, what did prison amount to? What did...
Well, we were put on a train, and they called them 40 men or 48 or 8 horses. And I think we had about 50 in that boxcar.
Uh-huh.
And we got on it and started up. We had a little thing full of sawdust for our restroom, as we would call it. It got pretty stinking before we got up to Germany. And I think we must have stopped 3 or 4 times on that trip. And they'd let us get out and stand on the ground for a little bit, and then we had to get back to the boxcar and go on to and that took about 3 days, I believe it was, to get up to Germany, where then would put us in Stalag VII A.
Well, now, was it, did you hear any, if you're on a train, you could hear planes overhead?
Yes, we did. They had a Red Cross emblem on the top of the train. But you could hear planes start down, but they didn't fire.
Uh-huh. Well, now, when you speak of, what would the train stop and at a station?
No, they stopped out at, not especially at a station, probably out the edge of the station. They'd bring some food in for us.
Mm-hmm. What did the food amount to?
Soup, rutabaga soup.
Uh-huh. And how was that served? Did you still have your canteens and your
They give us a little bowl,
uh-huh.
and No, we did not have canteen.
Have they taken all your equipment away from you?
Taking all the equipment, taking the helmets. We had nothing but our jackets.
Uh-huh. What kind of weather was this?
It was pretty nice weather because it was sunny when the few times that we stopped, and they let us out for a few minutes.
Mm-hmm. All right. You say that they would stop, and how long did this go on? How far did you go? Do you have any idea?
No, I would say at least 200 to 300 miles, I would think.
Mm-hmm. By the time and when the trip terminated, where were you?
In Munich.
In Munich.
Munich, yes, Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And then we marched from Munich to, well, we were out at Moosburg, but I went back this time, they call it Mossburg.
Mossburg. And where, you say you got out at Munich, got off the train at Munich.
Yes, and then they marched us to prison camp there.
Do you have any recollection of Munich at all?
Well, I worked on the railroad in Munich quite a bit. I was with a prisoner of war. We went into Munich and worked on the railroad.
Uh-huh.
Allies would bomb it in the daytime or night, and we'd go the next day and work on the railroad.
Uh-huh. What about the accommodations over at Moosburg or Mossburg?
Well, we were in little barracks, 3 high. Our beds or bunks were 3 high, and kind of a straw mattress, nothing fancy.
Uh-huh.
And the food was rutabaga soup and brown bread. And I swear that brown bread had an awful lot of sawdust in it. But that was about our...
Now, were the POWs doing the baking, or were there...
I think they were Germans. I never got over to the kitchen, but I assume they were German. 'Cause I never heard of anybody.
You didn't have a mess hall?
No.
They would just...
They'd bring a can. Well, we'd go into Munich and they would have buckets of soup and bread they'd bring in at noon to feed us.
Well, then at night, where did you eat at night too?
Yes. Same old thing.
But you'd go back to your barracks, and
yes, at
they
night.
would serve you right there in the barracks. Okay. Did you find that, did you lose weight? I guess you must have lost weight.
Well, the first time I was weighed after we were liberated, I weighed 112 pounds.
What had you been before you went in?
I think I was up around 160, 50 or 60.
Of course, that must have made you kind of weak. Did you notice the weakness coming on as...
Yes, as the longer we were captured.
Uh-huh. And what did you say your work there at the POW camp was to go back over to Munich and work on the trains?
Yes, they hauled us in trains back into Munich.
On trains? You go to Munich on a train?
Yes.
And, okay, you pile out of the trains, and what about the guards?
Well, we were very fortunate. We had what they called regular army guards. They were older people. Most of them were older in their 40s, I imagine. They couldn't, not made for combat, and they used them for guards. Yes, these guards, the SS troopers, they were even afraid, or the guards were afraid of the SS troopers. You could tell it whenever they went in and SS troopers come around, they would stiffen up and act like they were just scared.
Well, now, were these guards armed?
Yes.
The older
Most,
men?
yes, most all of them had rifles, and the sergeant in charge would have sidearms.
Uh-huh. And when did you encounter the SS troopers?
When they would go into Munich, they would see a lot of them around Munich.
Mm-hmm. Well, how come they weren't on the front fighting?
Well, I think they were on leave, possibly.
Oh.
And they were all younger people. Hitler's elite, they called it.
Were they, how were they being fed? Were they getting the same kind of food you were?
That I can't answer. But they, I know you'd see them walk down the street in a restaurant, they'd stop and they had their menu on the window. If it looked good, I guess they would go in, or they'd keep on walking. By the time I was captured there, situated, one of the German guards would say, "We can't go on forever like this." But the SS troopers say they must have treated them a little better, because they seemed more healthier than what our guards were.
Well, I don't understand. Your guards were saying, well, we've lost the war, and is that what you're saying?
That seemed to be their some thinking. They said, we just can't keep going. We don't have anything left to. They even had their old trucks. They run them on some kind of. It wasn't gasoline. It looked like steam. I'm not sure just how that. But you'd see their trucks going around. They had a big tank on them. Some way that they had a little fire down under this tank. So it must have been on steam or something. I never could quite understand how it worked. They wouldn't let us get close enough to see it.
Did you meet any of the German people other than your guards?
No. They kept us pretty well isolated from them.
Now this Mossberg camp, how big is it?
It was made for under 100,000, but before it was liberated, it was up around 200,000 troops.
200,000 troops, 200,000 POWs?
Yes.
There was that many people there?
I think at the height of it was. See, we were in there when the bulge happened. And it was pretty sad. You talk to these guys they captured in the bulge and said, we got pushed back. They said, gosh, are we losing this thing after all? Or,
And in other words, you had an influx of prisoners from the Battle of the Bulge.
Yes, we did.
Well, how close were you to that area?
That I'm not sure of. I couldn't. It was close enough that they brought quite a few troops in from it. I know that.
Quite a few POWs from the Battle of the Bulge. All right. Now, after, I assume what do you remember the time when your liberators came?
Well, I was fortunate in one way there. They took some of us out to farms. There was probably 12, 20 of us they took out to farms around that area. And when they liberated the camp, I wasn't actually in the camp. I was liberated by a tank pulling up the lane to this barn we were in. And we worked out of that barn, I expect, for maybe a week or a week and a half before we were liberated. They take us into a little small town. Can't even tell you the name of the town because I've never seen it. But we were fortunate. And I understand that Jim Smith here in town was one of the tank commanders that liberated it. And Elton Ross was also in a tank that liberated the Stalag VII A itself. Now, I can't tell you if it was liberated before we were, or there's just a short period of time in between.
You didn't know of them at the time, though?
No, I didn't.
Well, what happened after you were liberated? What kind of an experience is that? A lot of us, most of us, never had that happen to us.
Well, it's quite an experience. We were in this barn, and we heard, they had us in the barn, and we heard this tank, and we all run out, of course, hoping it was an American tank. Unfortunately, it was. And the sergeant in charge of the prisoners, or sergeant and the guards, the tank driver told him to go someplace. So he lined the guards up and they went down the road. Mm-hmm. And we talked to these tank people and were very happy to see them. Mm-hmm. But and they radioed back, and they had trucks out the next morning to pick us up. A truck out to pick us up, take us back to the rehabilitation camp.
Did they bring any food with them?
No, but it wasn't that far back till we had some food. It was all soft food too.
It was what?
All soft food, no steaks or anything like that. But they were very careful on feeding us and building us back up to strength.
Mm-hmm. And well, then you're back. Where do they take you back to?
We went back to Le Havre, France, where we were put on a boat to come back home.
Now, do you remember the date that you were liberated?
I was on the ship the day they announced the end of the war. And we were in Le Havre, and then we
So that would have been in the summer of
44 or 45.
45.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure the date anymore.
That would VE Day, they called that.
Yes.
And you remember the trip back?
Well, I read more books. We didn't have too many books, but that Statue of Liberty looked awful nice, I want to tell you.
That you get, so you landed at New York Harbor.
Yes. And they had processed us there and gave us a pass to go home.
And at that time, of course, you weren't married.
No.
And what did you do? They let you go, and then where were you deprocessed? Or
I went to Miami, Florida.
they took you down from New York to Miami.
Well, no, I had my leave. I went home, and then from home I went to Miami.
What were they thinking about sending you to Japan?
Well, that was the rumor going around. But fortunately, I had enough points I didn't have to worry about it.
They shipped you down to
Miami Beach. And stayed in a hotel down there called Bancroft, I believe was the name of it, for approximately a week, and then I ended up back in Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
and they sent you back up then to Fort Bragg. And did VJ Day happen then?
Yes.
Okay. And when you got to Fort Bragg, what did they do with you then?
I was in an outfit that artillery at that time, and they were testing trucks and guns. So I drove a truck until I got out of service, pulled a gun.
How'd you happen to get switched from infantry to artillery?
I can't answer, but it was better than walking, is all I can tell you.
And okay, you got you were discharged from Fort Bragg.
Yes.
And what did they do? What'd you do then?
Well, of course, they tried to talk you into staying. I was corporal at the time.
Oh, you started off as a, did you ever make PFC?
Oh yeah, I had PFC rank, and then I went get corporal when I got back in the States. And this colonel said, well, we'll make you a sergeant if you'll stay in. I said, I don't want no more of this. You can keep that stripe, John. I just want to go home and get out of here.
And they shipped you where from Fort Bragg?
They gave me tickets to Frankfort, Indiana.
Okay.
But back on the train, I got back on the train. I was going home and the train wrecked.
The train, where did that happen?
That was in, I think that was in Virginia someplace. Let's see, 1, 2, 3 or 4 cars went off the track. There was a little bank that rolled down the bank. Right behind us, I was at, matter of fact, I was in there shaving. Thought, well, I'll get shaved up before I get to the stop. And the car right behind me, I think there was 3 cars went over this bank after.
Anybody get killed?
I don't think anybody, there's quite a few injuries, but no deaths that I know of.
Yeah, of course, those were coaches too.
Yes.
Okay, on your trip back on the ship, was that a Liberty ship too?
Yes.
And
we didn't zigzag coming back either.
yeah. And oh, do you remember the zigzagging when going over?
Yeah, certainly do. And then you go this way, and the first thing you know, they'd be turning, going another direction.
Did you have did you go over in a convoy?
Yes.
What, you remember the escort? What was that?
No, I don't remember the escorts.
Could you see the
Oh yeah, you can see
ships
them.
protecting it?
There must have been, I'd say 20 ships in the convoy. I know one time we were cautioned the submarine was around, but nothing ever happened.
Yeah. Did you had to keep all the lights out
Oh yeah.
at night? All right, so coming back was a much better ride, and
Didn't take quite as long either.
yeah. And you were discharged from Fort Bragg and shipped given a train ticket to Frankfort.
Right.
And they had a train wreck on the way. Did that take a while to get that straightened out, or what did they do?
The good ones that weren't injured, we all doubled up in cars that were left. And I expect they were a couple of 3 hours. And one took the injured, and fortunately it was at the edge of some town. I can't remember the town now. But they put the ones that were not injured in the rest of the train. We doubled up. I think we was on it 1 or 2 days maybe after that. Where we got to where we spread out. Everybody went in different directions.
Oh, in other words, they took you that was before you got to Frankfurt.
Yes.
Uh,
Indianapolis, I think, is where they started shifting them different
Yeah.
ways.
Okay, where'd you go from Frankfurt? Went straight home, did you?
Yeah.
Who was there to meet you when you got there? Did they know you were coming?
Not definitely, they knew it. Called home, and my mother happened to be there, and she come over and picked us up, picked me up.
Now, had your folks heard from you at all while you were in the
No,
field?
they got missing in action telegram.
And that was it. Do you still have that telegram?
I don't know what.
Whatever happened to them? I think that maybe that'd be a memento that you'd want to say.
I remember that.
But they did find out, though, ahead of time that you were coming.
Yes, I wrote them. As soon as I got back to the States, I wrote a letter. Said I would, in the States, and well, not injured.
But you were just a lot thinner.
Yes. At that time I got pretty well refilled out.
Oh. Okay, Joe, now when you got back to the States, what happened? You went into the jewelry business. How did you happen to do that?
I had an uncle that was in the jewelry, and I kind of liked to tinker with something. Dad would always buy me a pocket watch. I'd have it tore up before too long to see what made it run. So I guess I was destined to be in that. He quit buying me watches. He said, "You tear them up faster than I can buy them."
Well, okay, how'd you have to be in Crawfordsville? You came from Frankfurt.
I went to Kansas City school to go to watchmaking school. And
From the GI Bill?
Yes, on the GI Bill. And got through school, and I started looking for a job in Indiana, and this is the first one I offered. I took it and been here ever since.
Well, now, did you go to work for somebody else?
Yes, I worked for Reasoners and Dick Williams here in town.
Oh. And then you started on your own.
We bought the Frank Martyr store.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah, I worked for the Reasoners about 10 years. And the Frank Martyr store had come up for sale. We put a bid and got it. Matter of fact, your old buddy, Dick Ristine, was the one that done the paperwork on that.
Was that right?
Yeah.
Well, Joe, you got married somewhere along the line there. Tell us about that.
Well, I got married when I was in Kansas City. I'd gone with this girl while I was right after service, and I went to school, and I called her one time, I said, "Let's get married." And she said, "Well, I don't know, but I'll have to catch the train," and so forth. And so we got married in Kansas City with some people that I were in watchmaking school with, and they stood up with us. And we meet every once in a while with those people yet.
Well, you didn't tell us, how did you meet this girl? And who was she?
Well, I had a friend that, a girl I went with in high school, or had some dates with in high school. She was married when I got back. She said, "Well, I know a girl that would probably be nice for you to go with." And she introduced me to her. Got married.
Was that at Frankfurt?
No, Mona was from Lafayette. This girl that introduced me, or her mother rather, introduced me to her.
And your wife's name is Ramona.
Right.
And,
Better known as Mona.
Yeah. Do you have any idea what the day your marriage was?
Yeah, I was kind of foolish of marrying when I did. It was December. And that's always a jewelry business best season. December 20th.
And that was what year?
Ooh. Been 52 years ago this year. So it'd be 1952, it'd be 1947, wasn't it? Yeah.
How many children do you have?
I have two daughters. They're one's in Chicago and one lives in Lafayette.
And what, are they married?
Yes.
And what are they, housewives or what are they?
One of them works with Mona now as a court reporter.
Oh, she's working with Mona.
She's the one that lives in Lafayette.
Yeah.
She has two children, Abigail and Samantha, both girls.
Uh-huh. What about the one in Chicago?
She works in she worked herself up to a vice president in the Continental Bank. I don't know what the name of it is now. And the stress got too much, and she went back to school, and she's a library science now. Works in libraries.
Which library is she up in?
In Spokane. She works at two different... Spokane. And one other, and I'm not sure where it is.
Yeah. And now, Joe, I want to find out more about your business. You say you bought Martyr's jewelry store?
Yes.
Where was Martyr's located?
111 South Washington.
Is that where you are now?
No, I stayed in that location about 4 to 5 years, I believe, and we moved to a little larger location, 3 doors down, 111 South Washington Street. It's expanded it, merchandise, and
Yeah. At the time that you bought the jewelry store, tell us about what jewelry stores were around town.
and at that time there was Reasoner's.
Where was Reasoner's?
It was on Main Street. It'd be 100 in the 100 block of Main, and then Williams would have been on Green Street. 109, I think, was the address of that.
And
Williams seemed like that. Oh yeah, there's a Martyr store there. There's 1, 2, 3. Three stores at that time.
had more jewelry stores then than we do now.
Right. We're down to 2 right now.
Yeah.
Of course, we got Walmart now. Penny's has jewelry.
Penny's and
Target has jewelry.
Target. So it's a little tough competing with all those chain stores.
Yes, it is.
You really feel that have they hogged the jewelry market, or think that
Well,
there's still hope for individual jeweler?
I think the specialty store, more like what we've done, is you're going to have to give them better service, because the stores like that, Walmart's and Target, can't give the service we do.
Now, Joe, there's another phase of this thing that we want to get into, and that is you went back there to your old camp.
Yes.
You had the old prisoner of war camp after the war. And when was that?
That was in 52. No, not 52.
92.
1992.
And how did you happen to do that?
Well, I guess I always wanted to see what it was like. See just what it, of course, the first time I was there, I was kind of scared the whole time. Didn't know what was going to happen from one day, and I wanted to go back and see what it really was like. And it couldn't have been a nicer. We run into a gentleman on a bicycle, and well, we took the train out from Munich to
Did you and your wife go?
Yes.
Didn't take your kids up?
No, I didn't know how I would stand up going back, but we got to Mossberg, got off the train, and there was a lady there in a taxi service, and we told her we'd like to go where the German camp was. Well, she wasn't sure about it, so she went to talk to somebody else, and she said, "Oh yeah, I know where you want to go." So she drove us down at the place and said, "This is it." Well, when we got out of the cab and I paid her, I knew this wasn't like where I had been. And we got to run into a gentleman on a bicycle. And we said, "Stalag VII A. Nay, 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 nay. He said, minute. He couldn't speak American, but so he took something he had on his bicycle in a house there, and come back, and he took us around and said, "This is where," well, he didn't say, he went to a German friend of his who spoke English, and took us in the house, and this gentleman must have been a guide for the area or something, because he had all kinds of stuff. He gave me a little pin that they give to all the prisoners of war as they come back, and he had a book there, all the names of some of the prisoners, but I'm sure he didn't have them all because the book wasn't thick enough to have. And I don't ever remember signing anything my name when I went into the camp.
Mhm.
So then I looked in the book and my name wasn't in there, so evidently they just quit taking names after so long a time. But and then they took us to 2 or 3 other people who spoke English. And we asked him about the camp. But there was still, I think it was 4 or 5 barracks left of the camp. And I regret I didn't go in one of the barracks because they, and a lot of the barracks, they had rented, the people were industry, it was in some of them carpenter shops and something like that. But there's originally maybe I'd say a dozen barracks still standing all around it. There were very nice homes now compared to when I was there. And, but the German people treated us just like friendly. And we got back, went all around, and we went back to this gentleman that was ambassador for us. And incidentally, he was American prisoner of war. He couldn't say enough about how he was treated.
Who was that?
I can't tell you the man's name. I think I have it someplace, but I don't.
Well, how did you happen to meet him?
Through this first German we met.
Oh.
We decided we couldn't communicate. We could make signs, Stalag VII A. And he took us to this gentleman who spoke English, and gives a little pin I have on a hat at home. And he said, take him to so-and-so place, and that was a place where they had this book that, the second German we met had the list of the prisoners of war. And he said, take it to so-and-so over here. In German, I didn't know where he said, but he took us over this, and they had a book that the people had been prisoner of war, had come back to see the camp, see what was left of it. And it had a big, it was a pretty good sized book, and people wrote a little saying, and glad to be back, or a little of their experience. And Mona wrote something in the book about us being back and seeing something. And then we went to, he took us to another lady that spoke German, and we got to talk to her about the barracks, and she said, well, they tore a lot of them down to make the houses, and some of the places they had a wood shop in one, and different shops in some of the old barracks that were still in pretty decent shape. But there wasn't too many of them left. And then took us back to the first German we went to, and he drove us back down to the train station, so we'd be sure to catch our train back to Munich, and then get back with our people on the tour.
Oh, you were with the tour?
Yeah. And we broke off from the tour when they went out to Munich and went to Mossberg. Moosberg, we call it Mossberg.
Yeah.
And the first gentleman met us at the train station, and he gave me a picture. His father helped build the prison camp. It was quite interesting. He gave me a picture to keep in the town of Munich, and a picture of the camp that his father worked on. It's quite interesting. You meet somebody that worked on the camp.
Yeah. What, when you spoke about the ambassador, that was, you saw where he had written in this book. Is that what you're talking about?
No, he had a book of supposedly the prisoners that were in this camp. Now, how he got that book, I don't know. I assume that.
Well, what's this? You talked about an ambassador. What are you talking about there?
Well, this was the gentleman that had the second German we met. He was the kind of ambassadors
Oh.
for the camp, or people that come back from
I
camp.
get you, yeah. Now, Joe, you've got there in your hand, these are your stories that appeared in this Montgomery County Weekly, is that it?
Yes.
And I think that, where's the other one?
No, I got them both doubled up there.
Have we gotten both that? Yeah. So that those are November of '94, November 10th of '94, and this one is.
Let's see, that one there, I think is before I went.
Uh-huh. So you're telling your experiences. So that if somebody wants to look this up, they'll be able to find it here in the weekly of West Central Indiana. And this one is October 20th of '94. Okay, I think that's about all, Joe. I'm going to cut off here and wait and see if Mike's got anything we ought to add. Mike, you raised a very interesting point about did you see any of the bombings? Talk a little bit about that.
Yes, we did see some of the bombings. As a matter of fact, on the railroad one time we were bombed, but everybody got away. We seen a P-38 come over in the morning and took pictures. At the time, he went over.
He was taking pictures.
Well, he stayed up too high and made no effort to come down and do any scraping. And he went over that morning, and somebody said he must be taking pictures or something, because there was a train going through, the first train that went through on, and it was going real slow, so he had to get a picture of the train moving through. And about sometime in the afternoon, the bombers come over and blew up everything we had done in seconds, which took us days to repair. But as soon as we seen the bombers coming right down the railroad track, we knew what was coming, and everybody took off running to get out from the bombing, and the guards started halt. When that first bomb dropped, they were passing us up on the run. But they then took us back to the barn, where I think the next day it was when the tank come in and liberated us.
Mm-hmm. Describe some of the damage that they did to Munich.
Mostly we seen only the area where the tracks went through town, but they no sooner get it laid back, and a day or two they would bomb it. They didn't get many trains through at that time.
Uh-huh.
Maybe at night they might get a few trains through supplies, but they kept it pretty well blowed up.
What about this railroad station in Munich? Was that destroyed?
We never got to the main station in Munich. They'd always get us off the train and start at the edge of town and work in.
Yeah.
We never got to the main station when I was a prisoner.
Yeah. Okay, now going back on this time that you went back to Germany, you say you met somebody who had built the camp, or had helped build it?
Yes, his father, the first gentleman we met after we got back was the bicycle man I talked about. After we got to talking to people who speak English, he told the other gentleman that his father worked and built the camp that we were in. Let's see, that must have been, they started building the camp, I think, in 39, I believe he said, 1939.
Oh.
So his father worked at building that camp to get ready, because he knew they were going to do something. He knew that they were going to do something.
And
now there were some Russian prisoners in with us on that camp. And they They treated those Russian. And also, there were some political prisoners. They were guarded by SS troopers. God, they beat those prisoners. Something terrible.
Did you see any of the beating?
Yes, I did see something on the. They had them working on the railroads also, but they kept them away from us.
So that was like in a separate area of your camp?
Yes.
Fenced off.
The Russians were kept separate.
Yes, Russians kept separate. They turned dogs in on the Russians once.
They turned the dogs in the Russians?
And on the Russians. Tried to get them to come out and work. They killed the dog and threw the head out to the Germans.
Well, this is just the stuff that we should have brought out.
I'm sorry I didn't think of it.
Did you, but you weren't in the same area with the Russians?
Just a fence in between us.
And you said, were there any Italian prisoners in there?
No attack. There's Russians and there's some political prisoners that I knew were there. Now I'm not sure.
Who would they have been?
They were political prisoners.
Yeah.
Well, they had special uniforms with stripes around them, and they were worse shape than what we were. I don't think they fed them as good as they did us, but.
Well, would they have been Germans or Jews or what?
I think a combination of both. I seen them carry one guy. Two guys carried one guy, and he just laid by the railroad track all day. He just didn't have enough strength to. They picked him up that evening, took him back to camp.
And just lay down and. When you say you were repairing railroads, were you using a sledgehammer or what?
Sledgehammer and mostly I was on the shovel gang to shovel rocks and level it off, the tracks off. And then some of them had a bunch of, after we got it leveled off, lay the rails down, and another group or the ties. And then they have another group to bring the rails on. Take about 100 of them to pick that rail up. They were so not strong enough to pick a rail up by themselves. They're too long to be picked up, any individual. Take about 50 guys to pick up on one of those long rails and lay it down. And then spike it. Not the fastest people in the world anyway.
Yeah. Who was doing the spiking?
Prisoners.
Be a pretty tough assignment, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Particularly when you had anything to eat. Was it, how about did you go through any winter there at all? Did you go
went through one winter.
What was that like? Did you have enough heat in your barracks?
Well, I ended up on frozen foot.
You did?
They had they had so many in the barracks that the heat from the bodies would make some heat, but they had a little stove in there, not enough to keep it too warm.
But you worked in the winter too then?
Oh yeah.
What kind of clothing did you have?
The clothes I was captured in.
And was that a summer outfit?
No, we had our wool outfit by that time.
What'd you do about your laundry?
Well, you could try to sponge it out, or
They didn't have any facilities for you to...
well, not a big facility to wash it. It had to be tubs. You could use cold water, a little bit of soap if you could find any.
Your own bodily clean, keeping your body clean, was that, what facilities did you have for that?
Well, they had a shower that he was lucky enough they'd have water in it. But
No hot water?
no, it was awful cold. maybe you might be lucky enough to get a little warm water, but not a lot.
Okay. Well, what was the worst experience that you can think of that you had? What was the worst time that you...
Well, I think the worst time it was the bombing, to get away from the American bombs outside. That's about the only time we really were close to being caught, I guess, in a bombing raid or anything. Of course, when they was taking us up to Germany, a few planes flew, but they had enough Red Cross signs on the train that they flew away before they opened fire. But the trip up there wasn't the most pleasant. 50 men in a boxcar, and doors locked.
Yeah. And no light?
No light, no. It was just a regular old German boxcar.
And no air?
Had a little, I think one on each end, a little window up high. You couldn't, not big enough to crawl through or anything. It had bars over it.
Joe, I think this has been a real good interview.
Thank you.
We really appreciate you doing this, and I hope that we've covered everything.
And I think, I get back, I'll always think of something else that we could have talked about.
Well, it's done something for posterity. So
they had the 50th anniversary of the war, and we had, I think it was 7 POWs around here that had been prisoners.
In Crawfordsville?
Of course, you remember Buck, I don't think his last name now, you mentioned it a while ago, Cordes.
Buck Cordes.
And there's a fellow down in the Dogo, two down in the Dogo.
Who were they?
Albert.
Well, of course, there was that guy that was in the baton, right?
Yeah. He was,
Yeah.
I think there's 7 still in life living at that time now. I don't know if there's any more than that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's about it.